The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host, and we are going to be continuing the conversation, except we're going to be talking about heavy metal. I'm not talking about AC/DC or any other bands. I'm talking about even outdoor ranges or well-ventilated indoor ranges. As shooters, we are exposed to lead and other heavy metals when we go shooting. If you shoot on an outdoor range or a modern, well-ventilated indoor range and only do it a couple times a month, washing your hands after shooting and refraining from licking your hands clean between mags probably isn't that big of a deal. If you shoot a lot, however, or have small children, you might want to pay attention to your level of exposure. The word bullet comes from boulet, which is the diminutive French term for ball. It makes perfect sense when you realize that the earliest handguns, or handguns, as they say in French, were basically miniature cannons, iron tubes closed at one end with a hole for a fuse. And like their bigger brethren, these weapons fired spherical balls, but due to their rates of fire, it would have been greatly expensive to make those balls of iron or stone. So instead, manufacturers used lead because they could easily melt and cast it into spheres, and even in the field. Plus, it was dense and heavy and had good carrying power, which allowed it to maintain its momentum downrange, where a lighter substance would not have. For quite some time, many advances in pistols were in ignition systems, meaning the primer, the gunpowder, and in the way in which they were held in the hands. An early 19th century percussion muzzle-loaded pistol uses the same spherical lead projectile as its fuse-ignited medieval forebearer. The first big change arrived when the rifling added to barrels, resulting in the spin to the bullets, thereby increasing accuracy. This caused those little balls to evolve into little cones or even pointed cylinders, which is what we have today. Then it permitted them to stay pointed in the right direction and take maximum advantage of the rifling-generated spin. In the late 19th century, propellant technology took a huge leap forward. New powders to propel these projectiles emerged and not only produced much less smoke, but also increased velocity. The jump in speed allowed smaller diameter bullets to be effective and also highlighted their shortcomings inherent in lead bullets. The increased velocity fueled by new propellants combined with rifle barrels to cause soft lead bullets to leave gray streaks of lead in the grooves down the bore. With a high enough pressure loading, the rifling grooves just tore the outer layer of the bullet away and left the core to go flying, unspun, down a barrel. In 1882, a Swiss Army officer and engineer, Edward Rubin, came up with a solution of surrounding the lead core of the bullet with an envelope of copper. A sufficiently thick copper envelope would take the engraving from the lands and grooves of the rifling without tearing away or disintegrating in a long gray smear down the barrel the way lead did. So basically these powders made the lead super hot and smeared off inside the barrel or the bore. This technology is used in its most basic form more than a century later or today, and is still applied to handgun bullets in several ways. The standard form, of course, is what's known as full metal jacket. This is your most typical inexpensive range ammunition, and it works the same as Colonel Rubin's original design. A lead core is inserted into a copper jacket from behind. Full is something of a misnomer, since the lead core is still exposed at the base of the bullet. This is no big deal in the grand scheme of things, but the lead that is exposed to the flame of the burning propellant will be vaporized and introduced into the air around the shooter. If you shoot in an outdoor range or a modern, well-ventilated range, washing your hands is good enough. But if you have small children, you're going to want to have some alternatives. Let me talk about these alternatives. So it's kind of silly. I'm looking at this article, and I'm giving you the kind of the summary of it. But the article is saying, hey, use TMJ, which stands for Total Metal Jacket. This is a term used to indicate that the entirety of the lead core is surrounded by the jacket. There is no exposed lead base to get vaporized and left hanging in the air after each shot. with that said, just because you have TMJ ammunition doesn't mean the person next to you has it. So here you are, you're going to be spending a little bit more money on ammo for safety, for health, and it's not going to matter. So you don't need to get these. Another solution to the problem is Federal's new Syntech line of practice ammo, where each lead core projectile is entirely contained within a polymer envelope to eliminate airborne lead. This is an evolution of the old NiClad ammo from the 70s that attempted to cut down on lead while being cheaper than copper jacketing. Now that we're in an economy in which copper, a valuable industrial metal, is unlikely to get any cheaper, any alternative to its use in an expendable product, such as small arms ammunition, is a net positive. If reducing airborne heavy metal contamination on your indoor range is important to you, the primer is another source. Lead styphenate, which is the preferred priming compound for many years, even though airborne lead was an unavoidable byproduct, early lead-free priming compounds were developed to protect special operations personnel who spent a lot of time busting caps on indoor training ranges. But a lot of these early lead-free priming compounds had combustion byproducts that were the equivalent of launching sandblasting compound down the barrel of the gun. These days, Federal Syntech uses a new lead-free primer called the Catalyst. Hopefully, we've moved past the barrel-destroying properties of the older ones. Now, I'll tell you what I tell my students. Wash your hands and face after you're done shooting with soap and cold water. And this is common in the firearms industry. We use cold water because it shrinks our pores. Hey, look, when we shave, men and women, we use warm water or hot water to open our pores to get a closer shave. So this is the same idea, although it's the opposite. We want to use cold water to close the pores. And then ask my students, hey, do you deal with small children? And I'm talking elementary age and younger. And for those of us who do deal with small children, I tell everyone, after you're done at the range, take a shower and change your clothing. And the reason why I say that is because after the range, I don't care if you use FMJ, TMJ, lead nose bullets, you are going to have lead dust on you. And children typically do not have the same personal body space parameters that adults have. Adults get very uncomfortable when you're within 18 inches, unless you're an intimate partner. Children and pets and dogs, they don't have that sense of, oh, I better stay out of their personal space. They just run up to you, climb up to you. And I miss those days with my children who are now adult size. They're no longer fun size, although they're still fun. So I do miss those days. But those days, the kids would run up to you. I'd come home, Daddy, and they'd run up. Actually, they called me Dad, but they'd run up to me and hug me and all that. So I wanted to make sure that I keep them safe as well from lead. So like the article said, if you're going to the range, once a week, 3 times a month, it's not going to really impact you as far as your health goes. Now, I did have lead poisoning about 10 years ago. I was working at a shooting range, and at the shooting range, my job was primarily to teach 1-hour Groupon lessons, which means I was half an hour in a classroom going over safety and function, and half an hour in the range where the people would get to shoot either a 38 and a 22 or a 9mm and a 22. And a lot of these were dates. It was date night or someone trying to get into the firearm sport. So basically I had 12-hour shifts, and 6 of those 12 hours I was on the range. Did I wash my hands? Absolutely. Of course I washed my hands between each person. But the reality is I was on there so much that it was ingrained. And I didn't have any symptoms of lead poisoning, although it does affect brain function. Some people might disagree with that, and that is me joking around. But I was in for some blood test, cholesterol test, something. And I said, why don't we test my lead also? So my lead levels were 3 times what they should have been. And I was a little freaked out because that was the only job I had. I was in between higher paying positions, corporate positions, and I did not want to lose my job. So before it was fashionable, meaning way before the pandemic, this is 2014, 2015, I had N95 masks and I had rubber gloves. And whenever I went into the range, I would wear it. Very interestingly, it did become harder to breathe the more I wore it. So I'd use one a day. And by the end of the day, it was a little difficult to breathe because the filters were doing their jobs. They were filtering out whatever contaminants were in the air. And 3 months later, my lead levels were normal. I did not stay at that job, and the amount of time I'm actually on the range now is minimal as opposed to when I did it 6 hours a day for 6 days a week. It might be a couple hours a week here and there. And now I go to ranges that are much more modern, much better ventilated. I did take someone shooting a long time ago. And afterwards, she blew her nose and freaked out because her discharge from her nose, or her boogers, were black. It's not around anymore, so I can talk about it. We were at Bell's shooting range on Mannheim in Franklin Park. And basically, it had a very poor, if any, ventilation system. I was a lot younger, so I wasn't really aware of ventilation systems at the time. And it was pretty filthy. So I had to explain, oh, no, that's your nose doing its job. And I also explained to my students in class that if you do blow your nose and you get black specks, it's your nose is doing its job. It's keeping out the contaminants from your body. So that is all about health and safety while you are shooting and on the range. And these rules, meaning don't lick your fingers, apply whenever you are handling firearms, meaning if you're cleaning them, if, I teach, so at the end of my class, I wash my hands. And that's basically how it is. So we want to not ingest lead. I know I'm repeating myself, and I apologize. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS 2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. We're going to be talking about home defense, and the best crime data out there is compiled by the FBI. There's an estimated 1,117,000 burglaries that occurred in the United States in 2019, with an average loss of about $2,600 in personal property per incident. Burglary not only led to monetary loss, but also they take an emotional toll on the homeowner. Fortunately, you can take steps to drastically reduce the odds of your home being burglarized. And a lot of times people use the wrong word. They'll say, oh, my house was robbed. You can't rob a house. You can only rob a person. The house was burglarized. The number one mistake that a lot of homeowners make is not getting enough proper training in how to use a firearm in self-defense. That's where I come in. They buy a gun, they have the salesperson show them how to load it, but they really don't know how to use it or when to use it. Defending yourself with a handgun becomes extremely challenging when the terror and subsequent adrenaline rush triggered by someone breaking into your home are added to the situation. You need to train yourself to be prepared to handle these debilitating emotions as well as you can, so they don't hinder your life when your life is on the line. That's one of the things that I do in my keynote speaking on my website, stress2logic.com, is I talk about how to overcome the hot stress mess. You're going to have tunnel vision. You're going to have auditory exclusion. You may perceive things happening in slow motion or sped up. And I have techniques, if you'd like for me to speak to your organization, on how to overcome those blockers. So even with this massive increase in gun owners, there isn't a correlation in the number of students taking classes, according to another instructor. They're buying guns, this other instructor said, but they're not getting properly trained. There's another trainer that fears homeowners are becoming complacent, which is true. They are in condition white when they're at home. They think they're safe, that nothing is going to happen to them, but that's not the case. They don't take precautions to secure their homes properly. He advises homeowners to be proactive and take precautions ahead of time, which can be accomplished by taking a home defense class, and it's an excellent start. From the bottom up, your house should be well lit, both inside and outside. There should be not only a light mounted on your home defense firearm that you can quickly illuminate, you should also have motion sensor lights outside. You need to be able to identify somebody in your house, and it's not maybe you left the front door unlocked and your drunk neighbor comes in. That has happened. That when I was on vacation as a teenager, there was a drunk guy trying to get into our condo, and he was drunk. He was trying to get into the next door condo. That's where he lived. But it scared the you-know-what out of us in the middle of the night. So there's a lot of tragedies that have occurred where people heard a bump in the night. They went out hunting in their house and ended up shooting someone that they did not intend to shoot because it's a neighbor's son or daughter or a friend who was there getting a drink of water in the kitchen. Also, a handheld light is important because you can scan your environment without pointing a firearm at another human being. But then you can bring your muzzle up to bear if you need to. So, and again, you might unintentionally press the trigger if you're startled, and a flashlight should be between 750 to 1,000 lumens. That works best for home defense. As for on-gun illumination, a Streamlight product is great. They're surefire grades. The controls are situated outside of the trigger guard, so you're not going to mistakenly hit the on button and instead press the trigger. So you don't want a device with the light operation inside the trigger guard, as you can unintentionally press the trigger. I've never even seen one like that. When it comes to external lights, some owners make the mistake of shutting off all their outdoor lighting at night. Don't do that. Have your lights on a timer. Have them on a motion sensor. Outdoor lighting around porches, doors, and windows are a great deterrent to stop a burglar before it even becomes an issue. Criminals do not like to work in bright light. They prefer to have the cover of darkness. Lights on all night long around the perimeter of your house are great tools to have. You want to save on electricity? Make a motion sensor. Very easy. And LED lights will also save on electricity. The entryway of your house should be fortified. Whether it's a door or window, it's a potential gateway for an invader. The steel door jamb reinforcement plates can be bought. They're available online and at most home improvement centers, and the plates make it more difficult for an intruder to break into your home. A traditional deadbolt and lock are okay in certain sense, but if you really want to break into someone's house, all you got to do is kick it. A firm kick will bring the door down. Instead of only wood between you and an intruder, a door jamb reinforcement plate adds a layer of steel that makes the door sturdier and harder to breach. Such a device consists of a steel frame placed around the point where the deadbolt and the door latch, and even better is this reinforcement is inexpensive. The plates give the door jamb more rigidity, and make it more difficult to conquer. Besides improperly secured front doors, first floor windows can also be problematic for homeowners. It's kind of interesting. We looked at a house 5 years ago, and I loved the house, but none of their windows locked. They needed to upgrade their windows. We did not get that house. So you can purchase wooden dowels, cut them to length, and put them in the track of your window if you have a sliding window or sliding door. I've done that. And it's also important to trim any plants that are close to your home. Now, I've always said have thorny, prickly plants under windows. It makes it a lot more difficult for the bad guys. There are several other things that you can do. You can get an alarm. You can get a dog. I've got a very large dog, and he is pretty ferocious. So, although a sweetheart to me, I don't want him to eat anyone who he shouldn't eat. That's a great deterrent. Although there's a lot of burglars who will bring in a steak, and you bring in a steak, and then the dog is occupied. Luckily, my dog doesn't do that. He is trained to not accept food from strangers. We'll have a friend over at the house who wanted to give the dog a treat. The dog won't take it unless I say it's okay, or a family member, not necessarily me, says it's okay. So again, dogs are very protective. It's a great idea. Another option is security systems, and these are alarms. They can be easily defeated though. So you want to have a panic alarm also. Easily defeated. What I mean is typically they are, if they're exposed, there's a magnet. If you put it on the actual sensor, it will confuse the sensor as if the window or door is closed when it can be opened. So that's for like inside jobs where you have someone at your house, perhaps a contractor, who will just sneak a little magnet up there. You don't even see it because it blends in, and then later they come and they pick the lock. The things in your house is just stuff. Property can be replaced. Life cannot. Which is why I covered, hey, have a flashlight. You do not want to take a life of an innocent person who is in your house mistakenly. And let me give you a story. Several Thanksgivings ago, maybe it was more than 10 years, I have an elderly relative who lives near me, and she called me up every year. Can you come and pick me up and bring me to Thanksgiving because I don't drive at night? Of course, absolutely. So I said to her this one year, this was the last year I did it because someone else started giving her a ride, but this had nothing to do with this story. So I say, hey, no problem. I'll pick you up at 5 or whatever time it was. I said, look, I know where you live. I know what the house looks like, but I forgot the house number. Can you give me the house number? So she gives it to me. And I've got the kids in the car. It's Thanksgiving, so at 5 o'clock, it's dark. And she told me, my garage door will be open. Just come on in. Okay, great. No problem. So what did I do? I pull up to the house. I check the house number. Garage door is open. House number is correct. I'm in the right place. So I go in through the garage. And the only thing that was out of place was there were random area rugs spread out in the garage. Now, growing up, my father was an engineer, and we had Dodges, so they leaked. And he would put a crappy old area rug underneath where the oil would leak or whatever other fluids would leak, like blinker fluid that would leak all over the ground. Hopefully you got that. But we had area rugs. We had mats so that the garage floor would not be affected. So I thought that was odd, but whatever. I go to the door and I knock on the door. Nothing. I can hear TV or I can hear movement going on the other side. So I wait a minute. Nothing. So I knock harder. Again, no answer. I can hear stuff going on. No answer. So at that point, I pound. And when I pounded, still nothing happened. So I said, well, she said, come on in and get me. So I opened the door. By the way, I am Caucasian, if you didn't figure that out. And standing in front of me was an Indian woman in a sari, which is the Indian garb dress, who took one look at me. Her eyes widened like saucer plates, and she said, "Oh my goodness," in the Indian accent. Let me tell you something. I scared the you-know-what out of her, and she scared the you-know-what out of me, because I did not expect that. Immediately I figured out I'm in the wrong house. I apologized. I'm very, very sorry. I'm picking up a relative. I'm in the wrong house. So turns out I was on the wrong street. Yes, I'm human. I make mistakes. So I figured out where I was. I went one block over, one street over, and I picked her up, and everything was fine. And then when we got to Thanksgiving, and to this day, my family calls me the burglar or the breaking and entering person, it makes for a great little story. But just because I'm in someone's house, if this were nighttime, I would want them to be able to identify me. And it was dark out, but it wasn't nighttime. It was dinner time. So I would want them to be able to identify me. And just because someone's in your house does not, in Illinois at least, does not give you the right or the justification or even the ethics in my world to fire at them, because they could be in your house by mistake. I grew up in Skokie. In Skokie, all the houses, they were like row houses built right after World War II, and they all kind of look similar. And oftentimes we would have in our house a neighbor's cousin, a neighbor's friend, who would walk into our living room, confused look on their face, look around and say, I'm in the wrong house. So people make innocent mistakes all the time like that. And just because someone's there or they're stealing your TV or your lamp or your stuff does not give you the justification to fire at them. They have to be posing a threat that will result in death or great bodily harm, which is a real nebulous term, means something different for everyone, or they're either threatening or they're hurting someone, and that someone has to be a person. If there's a coyote attacking your dog in the backyard, you cannot shoot the coyote, because a pet, I know a pet is part of the family, but a pet is considered legally property. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you're going to get fired up just like I did about anti-Semitism, and I hope you guys stay safe. Thank you for listening. We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.